Although Jacob was confident that the painting was very old, he didn't know much at all about its true value to art dealers. For him, $12,000 was a great deal of money, and he had left himself with almost nothing at all to live on. Seeing Jacob considering his offer, the man added,
"How about I add another $1,000? We'll call it 13,000.
Several other customers in the store started to take notice of the negotiation, and one experienced buyer said,
13,000 is an excellent price for that picture. It's more than you could hope to get for it anywhere else."
He's right. If someone offered me that much for a fake Ben Gaultier, I'd take it straight away.
I have to agree, you won't get a better offer than that,
said another customer. Looking on resentfully from behind the counter, the store owner sensed an opportunity.
"Sir, if you're willing to spend that much on a fake, I have several other Gaultier copies at the back of the store. Would you like to come and look at them? I'm sure we can come to an agreement. To be honest, I think one of them is even better quality than that one."
But the middle-aged man ignored him. He looked at Jacob and asked,
"Well, what do you think?"
Before Jacob could answer, the store owner pushed past Jacob and said,
"Sir, I'm serious. I have more of them. Don't you want to see them?"
Having been pushed out of the way, Jacob felt annoyed at the store owner's attitude. He thought,
"What a cheat. He's just jealous that I might make more money from the picture than he did. Well, if that's how he's going to act, maybe I'll see how much I can really get for the picture."
Jacob looked again at the middle-aged man and said,
"It's not that I don't want to sell the picture to you, but there's something else about this painting."
The man nodded and said,
"Go on, what do you mean?"
The other people in the store looked on with obvious interest. Many of them were experts, and they were eager to see if there was more to the painting than they had realized. But the store owner sneered.
"This is a joke. I've been doing this for more than 20 years. Are you trying to say that I don't know what I'm talking about? This is just a regular copy of a Ben Gaultier landscape. It's as simple as that."
Jacob looked at the man and raised his eyebrows.
"Don't worry. You're not the only one to have misjudged this painting. There's something mysterious about this picture, and I intend to find out what it is."
The owner laughed disdainfully.
"There's nothing mysterious about that painting, I assure you. And if you prove otherwise, I'll change my name."
Jacob smiled and said,
"Well, how about we make a bet? What if I do find something mysterious about the picture?"
"Let me introduce myself properly."
The store owner said, sensing the opportunity to get the picture back and make more money.
"My name is Thomas Taylor. I'm willing to bet $15,000 that there is no hidden mystery in this painting. If I'm wrong, I'll give you the money. But if you're wrong, you have to give the painting back to me."
"You're on, but I need proof of our agreement. Let's write it down."
The middle-aged man intervened.
"Let me assure you both that with me here as a witness, there's no need to make a written contract. No one will deny the terms of the wager. Kyle Shaw is my name, and I'll ensure that both parties stick to the agreement."
The other customers all recognized the name.
Wow, Kyle Shaw is famous in the antique business. I've always wanted to meet him.
As one of the leading experts in the field, Kyle Shaw was taken very seriously. He had even had his own television show, identifying and valuing various antiques, especially paintings. Jacob nodded, happy to accept Kyle's assurances.
"Okay, let's get on with this then, shall we?"
He turned to Thomas and asked,
"Would you please get me a glass of water?"
Thomas gestured to one of his assistants and told her to fetch some water. Then he sneered and said,
"Kyle Shaw is our witness, so don't think you can get out of this now."
A few moments later, the assistant came over and handed a glass of water to Jacob. Jacob placed the painting on the counter and then raised the glass to his lips and took a long drink. To everyone's surprise, he sprayed the water from his mouth onto the painting, soaking it. Then he picked up a pair of tweezers that were on the counter and started to pick at the corner of the picture. There were several gasps of amazement as the picture began to peel away, revealing a second layer beneath it. As Jacob continued, a second picture was revealed. The second picture looked almost the same as the first, so much so that the onlookers could hardly tell the difference between them. Kyle looked on in wonder, and a huge smile spread across his face.
"That, I believe, is an original Ben Gaultier painting,"
he announced, his hands trembling with excitement. There were several comments from the onlookers.
Could it really be an original?
Well, if Kyle Shaw says it is, then it must be.
That young man has quite a discerning eye.
It must be worth a fortune.
The owner of the store was stunned and looked on in dismay. He knew he had made a big mistake and had lost a lot of money as a result. With the famous Kyle Shaw looking on, he knew he couldn't refuse to pay up. But Kyle was more interested in purchasing the painting. He grabbed Jacob by the shoulders excitedly.
Young man, how much do you want for it? How about $50,000?
I'm sorry, Mr. Shaw, but I don't want to sell the painting right now.
Kyle was momentarily stunned. He had a great love of Ben Gautier's paintings, and he desperately wanted to buy the picture. Although Jacob was tempted to sell the painting, he didn't know the true value of it, and he didn't want to act rashly and sell it for less than it was worth. The store owner looked on from the side, feeling increasingly cheated. He was tempted to reach out and snatch the picture out of Jacob's hands. $50,000 was a lot of money to him, and he was desperate to think of a way to regain control of the situation. Thomas suddenly grabbed Jacob by the arm.
This painting is still in my store. I've decided to cancel the sale. I'll refund you your money immediately and give you 10 times what you paid for it, but I demand that you give me back the picture.
Jacob looked at Thomas incredulously and then pushed him away.
I've already bought the picture, and I have no intention of giving it back to you. Now we have a bet to settle, so please give me the money you owe me.
Thomas looked around, desperately considering his options.
Mr. Taylor, are you trying to go back on your word?
Kyle asked coldly. Thomas didn't like being put on the spot and glared at Jacob. He quickly filled out a check and threw it at him. Jacob calmly picked up the check and then put away the painting. He smiled at Kyle and then turned to leave.
Wait, hold on a minute.
Is there something else?
Kyle took one last reluctant look at the painting in Jacob's hand.
Here's my business card. If you ever decide to sell that painting, please contact me. I'm still willing to negotiate.
Jacob nodded and then walked out of the shop. The other customers gradually exited too, leaving Thomas all alone. He sat behind the counter stewing. It wouldn't take long for what had happened to spread through the entire antique market. It was the most exciting thing to happen there in a long time. His arrogance had gotten in the way and had caused him to make a big mistake. As a result, he had lost a lot of money and feared he would soon become a laughingstock to all the other shop owners. The shop door suddenly opened, and a mysterious bald man walked in. He had a long scar on the right side of his face that made him look incredibly intimidating.
What can I do for you, boss?
Round up a few of the guys and follow the man who bought the painting. You must get it back from him.
The man nodded.
Don't worry, I'll handle it.
Jacob felt like he was in a dream as he walked down the street. He had a check for $15,000 in one hand and a priceless painting in the other. He thought back to how worried about the money he had been during the past few days. The money he had made that day meant his mother wouldn't have to work so hard anymore. It brought tears to his eyes when he thought about how she had struggled to take care of them over the years. He had a funny feeling he was being followed and looked back. Something told him whoever it was, they were up to no good. He recalled how upset Mr. Taylor had looked when he left and wondered if he had something to do with it. He reasoned that anyone would have been upset after losing thousands of dollars. Whatever the case, thanks to his newfound special powers, he wasn't afraid of the three men behind him. The vendors at the antique market got along well and abided by a code of conduct. Although they were all in the same trade, no one dared to start a fight or stir up any trouble. But the thugs Thomas had sent to follow Jacob were different. Jacob wandered through the streets of the market. He looked at the shops on both sides, trying to find another hidden treasure, but it was easier said than done. Only trained experts knew what to look for. After a few hours, he gave up and decided to head home. Meanwhile, the three men never stopped following him. Jacob reached the end of the market and turned down an alley. He saw no point in wasting time with his stalkers. He decided to face them head-on. The three men turned the corner to see him standing there with a grin.
Do you mind telling me why you've been following me all this time?
Jacob asked. The men hadn't expected Jacob to catch on to them and didn't know how to react. The man with the scar was in charge and spoke up.
Hand over that painting and get out of here. If you promise never to show your face at the antique market again, I promise I'll let you live.
Jacob scoffed and shook his head.
Tell me who sent you to find me, and I promise I won't hurt you.
The three men looked at each other and then back at Jacob. One of them turned to the man in charge and waved his hand.
You don't have to take this kind of disrespect from this kid. We've killed a lot of people, and adding one more to our list won't be a problem.
Jacob got a little nervous when he heard that. The men were obviously not there to play games. They both looked like cold-blooded killers. Jacob looked closer at the bald man's face and couldn't help feeling like he had seen him somewhere before. Then it hit him. He was the criminal whom he had seen in the news a few days before and was wanted by the FBI. Each man held a dagger in his hand. The bald man looked at Jacob intensely.
We're not leaving without that painting. We tried to do this the easy way, but you insist on doing it the hard way.
He rushed at Jacob, ready to cut him into pieces. The other two quickly moved in, and before Jacob knew it, he was backed against a wall. He felt that there was no need for him to hold back. He dodged the bald man's second attack. Then he sprang into action and hit him in a particular spot on the back of his neck. The man groaned as his body hit the wall, and then fell to the ground with a loud thud. Before the other two men could react, Jacob reached out and pinched the shoulder of one man, who screamed in pain and then collapsed, cradling his arm. Two men were sitting on the ground uselessly, leaving only one to be dealt with. The last one standing had watched in horror as Jacob defeated his companions with ease. It was clear to him that Jacob was no ordinary college student. He began to tremble in fear and broke out in a cold sweat. Jacob took a deep breath and then raised his fists, cocking his head questioningly. He took one step forward and caused the thug to jump back, trip, and fall. Jacob stood over him and smiled.
You scare pretty easily for a gangster. It may be tough for you to consider a new career.
Jacob leaned down and gave him a quick tap on the back of the head that knocked him out immediately. Jacob looked around at the three men on the ground. He was alarmed to see that the first two were still unconscious and took out his phone to call an ambulance. However, he stopped when he realized it may not be a good idea. If he called an ambulance, it would inevitably lead to a series of questions. No one would believe a normal student could easily defeat three hardened criminals, so he put his phone away. He figured someone would notice them eventually and report it. Back at the Timeless Antiques store, Thomas had been sitting patiently behind the counter, waiting for an update. The bald man had been gone a while, and Thomas expected he would return with the painting. Thomas vowed that he would make Jacob pay for what he had done. It was rare to find an authentic Ben Gaultier painting. They were very popular, and most of what was available turned out to be imitations. If he could get his hands on an original, he knew he could make a fortune at an auction. Business hadn't been very good for his shop the past few years, and he could use the money. While Thomas was still deep in thought, his phone rang. When he saw who it was, he couldn't help but smile.
Hello, to what do I owe this privilege?
An angry voice shouted at him on the other end.
What stupid shit did you pull today?
Nothing. What's wrong?
Thomas wondered why Brad Owens, the deputy director of the FBI, was questioning him.
The man that you hired to help you showed up in the hospital this afternoon with two other known criminals.
At the hospital? What happened?
Thomas asked nervously.
They lost the fight, obviously. Two of them are violent criminals. Did you know that?
Of course, I knew that, but you know what it's like in this line of work. Sometimes we have to use guys like them.
What the hell do you mean by that? Can't you just run your business legally? Why do you insist on underhanded deals that end up getting us both in trouble? I suggest you go somewhere and hide out for a while.
Thomas was confused by Brad's reaction.
Is it really that serious? Surely as the deputy director of the FBI, you can make sure I'm protected.
Have you lost your mind? Judging by your men's injuries, neither you nor they are a match for whoever you were after.
That's ridiculous. They were just threatening a young college student.
Trust me, this was clearly the work of a skilled fighter. You've provoked the wrong person and are way in over your head. Take my advice and hide before he comes after you.
Brad hung up abruptly. Thomas didn't know what to think. He had always been able to count on his friend in the FBI to provide cover for him. He had thought their relationship allowed him to do business however he wanted. He was disappointed to realize that his friend couldn't come to his rescue when he needed it most. Jacob continued his way home when someone called out to him from a distance.
Jacob, is that you?
He turned around and was surprised to see Julian Jones standing behind him. Jacob and Julian were good friends. They lived in the same dorm at the medical university. Julian had grown up in Oakdale City. His family was very rich and well known in the area, but Julian liked to keep a low profile. Jacob shook his hand.
What a coincidence. I just happened to walk by the antique district and decided to take a look around since I'd never checked it out before. I didn't think I'd run into anyone I knew. Jacob, let me introduce you to my friend. This is Cole Lambert.
Hello.
Jacob reached out to shake Cole's hand. Cole shook his hand quickly before putting it back at his side. Most of Julian's friends were rich and important, and this one was no exception. Everything about Cole exuded wealth and privilege. He had only shaken hands with Jacob out of respect for Julian. However, wealth and privilege didn't matter much to Julian. He assumed any friend of his would get along great with Jacob. He patted Jacob on the shoulder and smiled.
Have you eaten yet? What do you say we go get a bite together?
Jacob shook his head.
Thanks, but I have something to do, and I don't want to intrude.
Don't be silly,
Cole said. It was obvious that he was only trying to be polite. Jacob saw right through it and was about to refuse again when Cole noticed the long parcel in Jacob's hand and immediately began asking questions.
That's a painting, right?
Yes, I saw it in one of the shops and liked it. I don't know much about art. I just bought it on a whim.
Such a cultured gentleman,
Julian said jokingly. Cole's curiosity was piqued.
Do you mind if I take a closer look?
Sure, go right ahead.
Jacob unrolled the painting and handed it to Cole. Cole looked at it carefully. Julian noticed the change in Cole's expression.
What's the matter? Is it damaged or something?
Cole didn't respond, but his hands trembled with excitement. He spread the painting out on a nearby table. He reached into his bag for a magnifying glass and started to examine it carefully. Jacob hadn't expected Cole to be an expert, but it seemed like it hadn't taken him very long to discover just how extraordinary the painting was. Julian had no idea what was going on but didn't want to interrupt Cole by asking questions. After more than 10 minutes had passed, Cole finally put down the magnifying glass and sighed.
Well, there's no doubt about it. This is a Ben Gautier's original.
Although Julian didn't know much about art, he knew who Ben Gautier was.
Those are incredibly rare. How much do you think it's worth?
Cole couldn't contain himself. He grabbed Jacob by the shoulders.
Hey, would you consider selling this to me? How much do you want for it?
Jacob hesitated to answer. The truth was he didn't know exactly what an authentic Ben Gautier piece was worth, but he knew it wasn't less than the $50,000 Kyle Shaw had offered. He couldn't bring himself to ask for such a high price. Cole could tell Jacob was uncomfortable, and so he looked to Julian for help. He had always been a fan of Ben Gautier's work and couldn't pass up the chance of owning such a special piece. Julian tried to put Jacob's mind at ease.
Listen, man, if you don't want to sell it, forget it. But if you do, I can assure you Cole will give you a fair price.
Julian was like a brother to Jacob, and he trusted him.
All right, Cole. Give me your best offer.
Quite straightforward, I respect that. I estimate this painting is worth at least $50,000. If you took it to an auction, you would get even more. Of course, the auction charges a processing fee. So taking all of that into consideration, I'm prepared to offer you $75,000.